Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Hirobe Talks podcast. This one I'm really excited for. I'm joined by Eric Hansen of Western Governors University, a non-profit, which is very, very interesting to me. So, Eric, for those that don't know yourself, do you mind just giving us a quick intro as to sort of who you are and your role at WGU?
Sure, be happy to. Thanks. I am Eric Hansen, and I've been in the analytics space for all of my professional career. I kind of fell into it a little bit. I figured I would start out with computer science and studying information systems. I worked in various odd jobs throughout university, myself, network operations and programming and such. So I fancied myself a very technical person, a techie nerd, as you will. And I had the opportunity to combine that with a little bit of studies of Mandarin Chinese. And that was a fun bit of experience where both of those skill sets came together in this opportunity to work at a very small company at the time called Omniture. And Omniture, for those who are a little bit newer to this space, was one of the first pioneers in terms of web analytics solutions and platforms that came into the market there. And so I was hopping around at a career fair one day, showing my resume, and they were very excited to see that, hey, you have a computer science background and you speak Mandarin. We need someone to help us build up our Mandarin technical support. And I hadn't graduated from university yet, so it was kind of a win-win situation in the sense I got exposure to the world of web analytics, as well as all of the interesting opportunities to practice my language skills and Mandarin Chinese. And that got my foot in the door. And I just fell into this world, and it's been an amazing ride. Haven't looked back since. So ever since then, I started out at Omniture. Obviously, that was later acquired by Adobe and became what is known today as Adobe Analytics. And I've served a number of roles at Adobe in various companies, whether it was tech support, as I started out in, or engineering roles, consulting, ended up in product management. But then around 2014 or so, I was actually recruited by the nonprofit sector, which was very fascinating to me because I was very familiar with retail web analytics use cases and other types of commerce that were going on, but I really hadn't had much exposure to the nonprofit side of web analytics. And to look at metrics and consider metrics that were outside the realm of revenue or average order value or those customer lifetime value metrics was very fascinating and intriguing to me, in the sense that there are a lot of different use cases for web analytics. And this was a space that I could go into that was more mission driven, had a real purpose behind it. And so ever since 2014, I've been in the nonprofit side of web analytics and digital experience analytics, and it's been an amazing journey so far.
I'd love to hear that. I think it's really good insight as well, because obviously from our work with Adobe, a lot of the companies that we recruit for are obviously in the tech or the consulting space. Obviously big focus on like revenue and increasing revenue and such. But it's also great to see how, like you say, you can work with Adobe in the non-profit sector as well. I'd love to, dive a little bit deeper into that, because I think that's rewarding in a totally different way, maybe, than the sort of your consulting roles. So tell me a little bit about how Adobe benefits you and the WGU team.
Yeah, I think Adobe's analytics toolkits are really extensible and very customizable, which is a great power and responsibility. I've found that whether it was in consulting or in my current work in nonprofit, leading nonprofit teams, there's a lot of new doors that are opened when you have that level of extensibility and customizability in your implementation of collecting rich pieces of data that inform your strategy and help you optimize the various tactics that you employ, regardless of what industry you find yourself in. And so I found that obviously Adobe has a strong repertoire of support for the for-profit sectors of the economy, most notably e-commerce. But again, that advantage of being highly customizable allows us to adapt it fairly easily to those nonprofit use cases. So when I think of those nonprofit use cases, I think of things of metrics like engagement, persuasion. And so that naturally leads me down to thinking of the magic 3 metrics of media: reach, frequency, and duration. Obviously, presence of mind, brand development, those types of metrics become more important in the nonprofit world versus the traditional revenue metrics there. And then obviously the custom success events that you can deploy and measure growth. But in the nonprofit world, a larger measure and a larger driver often will be efficiency when you are dealing with constrained budgets. And so making sure that you are setting up your platform to measure efficiency in an effective and manner that can be optimized, those are going to be the 2 primary ways that you leverage the Adobe platform and the Adobe suite to optimize and grow the nonprofit organization.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate that. That's, particularly interesting for me because, like I say, a lot of the work that I do is in the, for the revenue sort of increasing systems as well. So, yeah, it's great to see how it can be, deployed within the non-profit sector. I think something we should really touch on is, the path forward for Adobe Analytics and its journey into CJA. I've seen an uptake in requests for, analysts, consultants. A lot of companies are hiring now around that as people sort of migrate away. So how do companies sort of negotiate privacy changes, and what advice would you give?
That's a big question. I think there is a lot of directions any organization, any company can go as they handle privacy changes. And a lot of it will be a case-by-case basis. The most obvious implication is that the level of partnership that needs to occur between the analytics organization and the legal department within a company needs to go to another level, right? Where there used to be a little bit more of a, I guess, an established pattern in the past with web analytics solutions. All of these legislative and privacy changes and technology changes are really driving home a need to make sure that there is a strong partnership between your internal legal team that's assessing the risk and understanding what type of appetite your company or organization has a risk, their risk appetite is. And so I know, for example, in America, nonprofit organizations are in a slightly different position than a lot of other companies within the US and around the world. So, for example, we tend to have more exceptions surrounding our privacy regulations, and especially as a university, in my case, where we are required by law to collect more information and preserve it. And so there are certain types of things where in certain situations you might have a right to be forgotten, or there might have some deletion. There might be some things that we are legally required by law to keep. And so even in our situation where we might not be as directly impacted by things like GDPR, since we're only based in the United States right now, the cultural and technical changes still have a level of significance and impact for us as an organization. And so I guess the short of it is we still need to take these cultural shifts into account and try and be ahead of it. Just because the law might not require us to implement certain privacy features doesn't mean we can't proactively go out and find ways to engage ethically and respectfully with our customers or potential customers to make sure that there's a better understanding and appreciation for what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we're collecting, and how it's going to benefit everyone in the end. Because to be honest, these data that we use help us keep our costs low as a nonprofit to make sure that we're not overcharging for educational services that we're providing for our students. So there's definitely a mutually beneficial relationship in making sure that data sharing is happening. We just need to be a little more intentional about how we approach it and how we build our relationship with individuals such that we can capture that data in a trustworthy manner and make the most of whatever we capture. In a sense, it's been really good for marketing organizations to be more intentional in this space because it allows us to capture, in some cases, better quality information. Because if we're upfront and intentional about it, zero-party data starts to come into the picture more and more as a requirement to make sure that our marketing and outreach efforts are appreciated and effective. So obviously, volunteered data from the individual themselves, where you're starting to build that relationship, can give you way more insights than inference data that someone might have gathered or developed about you from via third-party cookies or other types of technologies or previous approaches. So in that way, it's kind of a good thing that we're dealing with these privacy changes and that the conversation is being forced. So I would say, prioritizing and building your first-party data ecosystem and owning your optimization strategies, that's going to really accelerate demand for products like customer journey analytics, because that is going to be the platform that you're able to collect and gather and stitch these data points together in, and on a first-party person-centric basis, rather than the old web analytics paradigm of a device, tracking a device and visit sessions. And so that is definitely one of the, biggest opportunity areas of moving into this new world, this new paradigm of customer journey analytics over the old world of Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics or whatever web analytics platform you had before. The one piece of advice I would give in this area, though, is the fact that however complex you think Adobe Analytics or your web analytics platform is today, CJA is at least an order of magnitude more complex. And so you are deliberately moving into the personally identifiable information space. So Adobe Analytics historically has kind of stayed out of that arena. So that means now in this new world, you need to pull in IT security, privacy, and legal teams early and often in the process as you go about this process of implementing customer journey analytics. But in the end, if you do it right, it can enrich and make your marketing potentially an order of magnitude more effective.
Awesome. I love that. And I think, something I've seen from the recruitment standpoint is, customers are almost aware of that now and are trying to build out those teams who can implement that change. Because whilst I appreciate that was a big question, I've got, I suppose, another quite a big question for you now, Eric, as well. Because they do sound like big changes to have to make. So how would you navigate a company through that change? Because surely that would require, a change of mindset, change of architecture, change of sort of paradigm, as you said.
Yeah.
Are there any tips or words of wisdom you can share on actually navigating that change?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I would add to what you're talking about navigating a company is also just navigating the individual teams at that company into this question, because these mindsets need to start at a more granular level than just a top-down approach of we are going in this direction. It needs to be both a top-down sponsored effort as well as a bottom-up grassroots effort. And so that brings into question and the thought of making sure that we are deliberate in how we implement change management into this process. So I'm personally a huge fan of the ADKAR model of change management. And for those of your listeners who don't know, ADKAR is an acronym that stands for the 5 phases of change management, the change management process. 1, awareness, that A. 2 is the desire. And then 3, knowledge, where we're building up the knowledge about the change. 4, cultivating the ability to go through that change. And then 5, reinforcing the processes and the changes that have taken place. So making sure that we are implementing an intentional plan that first it goes through the proper order of this ADKAR model can be really helpful in making sure that we are able to effectively succeed in changing our mindsets, changing this architecture and paradigm. And so, yeah, I would start with that awareness. If you're the champion of going through a big change, like I am at my organization, of going, hey, we need to change everything about web analytics and go to a customer-centric, customer journey analytics platform, I'm first talking to and finding who's that executive sponsor going to be. In my case, it's our VP of Marketing Operations, who's our primary sponsor and champion at WGU. And he's been great. It's been great to work with him, and he's been one of our biggest drivers and supporting us and helping us garner justification and other types of support at an executive level. Even his conversations and my conversations with him, they sort of resonate and have already started to draw in interest from adjacent organizations that will either support us or benefit from this migration into a customer journey analytics platform. So that's step number one. Step number two then is starting that grassroots effort, working with your current web analytics team and helping them become aware of the challenges that we're facing. Like we were talking about, the changes in privacy and legislation, technology, and even just consumer expectations in terms of how personalized an experience ought to be. Those all are drivers towards this new paradigm of customer-centric journey analytics rather than the old web analytics paradigm. So that means helping your individual team understand and appreciate what that problem is. And as they become aware of the problem, then their desire to find a solution will naturally present itself. And then as that desire grows and you help cultivate that knowledge about what options and solutions are out there and what we've chosen to go with, in this case, Adobe's Customer Journey Analytics platform, then they will naturally need to start developing their abilities to support this paradigm. Whereas my implementation engineers, they're very proficient in deploying JavaScript code that is very structured and compatible with Adobe Analytics. But then now with the new Web SDK that's associated with the Adobe Experience Platform, that's a whole different set of paradigm to learn. And so we need to implement some training and some enablement to help my implementation engineers better appreciate the nuances of schema design and development and deployment of data layers and everything that is associated with that, because we're introducing new layers of abstraction that they didn't have to think about before. And so I think there's a lot of efforts there, but between having a strong executive sponsor and building up this groundswell of support from a grassroots level through the ADKAR model of change management, that's really going to be helpful in making sure we have a successful migration and transition. The one thing I would add in to this conversation, though, is also the principles of how we get the work done. And that's just introducing the principles of Agile into analytics. So like I said, I have a computer science background. I've worked with developers in engineering, yet there's a lot of organizations that I've either consulted for or worked with that, at least in the beginning, did not have an Agile approach to analytics. And there's a huge amount of benefit to be had and to be gained by implementing Agile principles and methodologies into the whole analytics pipeline, not just the development and implementation of the data collection, but even the reporting and every aspect along that journey of deploying customer journey analytics. So the principles of chunking out your work into smaller sprints, the principles of incrementality, incremental value delivery, and working and building up to something that's more a full sustainable strategy is really, really important. And so I think those are the bits of wisdom that I would add. And I think what it all comes down to is that up-leveling of your relationships and communications that are happening between you, your dependent organizations, and even your team.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think having that, I suppose, transparent and open communication to actually enforce that change. As you said, that focus on change management as well, I think is so critically important. As you sort of alluded to it, it's such big change that you kind of need everyone on board, right? To help empower and achieve that. So no, I appreciate your pearls of wisdom on that one as well, Eric. Now, I think obviously there will be challenges, I think, that, that Adobe will face, I suppose, or Adobe users with the integration of products then. How do you think companies will fare integrating products that aren't necessarily Adobe, e.g. Telium for CDP, but also using Adobe Analytics, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, you're mentioning one of those questions that we're wrestling with a bit here at WG already, in the sense that we are using Telium's offering currently as our CDP, yet we want to adopt this Adobe Experience Platform stack to help us launch Adobe Customer Journey Analytics. And I've worked at Adobe before. I've worked at other organizations that are moving into this space, and I think the enterprise appetite, or the organizational appetite to buy a complete stack solution that is being presented by Salesforce or Adobe or all of these different marketing cloud vendors out there, it seems to be waning somewhat. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these one-stop shop kind of organizational solutions always tend to have varying levels of strengths and weaknesses. Whereas one organization, or like an Adobe, might be particularly strong at web analytics, maybe there's another aspect of the marketing cloud that they're not quite there yet. And so there's this challenge of, okay, do we accept the trade-offs of going with one-stop shop kind of solution, but then have decreased capabilities relative to some of the competitors? Or do we try to just focus on the value of best of breed solutions and create an expectation that whatever organizations we do work with, or whatever companies or vendors we purchase from, are going to integrate better with these various point solutions there? Obviously, that second option tends to carry with it a bit more of an integration risk to a certain extent. Definitely a little bit more relationship overhead, and a bit more commitment on the part of the individual organization itself to help navigate the challenges of integrating these different pieces. But in reality, it seems like most organizations are still going to go down that path, because at every company, you're going to have champions for different functions of the organization. And so while I might be singing the praises of Adobe Customer Journey Analytics and really championing that, I might not have the persuasion or influence, or even the inclination to fight really strongly for this particular optimization engine or A/B testing platform, for example. So I know I am in charge of supporting A/B testing platform, and we're currently using Adobe Target. But at the end of the day, my level of influence on what vendor we go with for A/B targeting is going to be pretty minimal. And so there's a very real possibility in the near future that WG is going to go work with a different A/B testing platform. And so if that happens, we need to make sure that we are doing the necessary legwork, both working with the vendor, but then internally to make sure that we are planning for integration between these various systems. It's always more difficult than people initially plan for. And that's just the one bit of advice that I would say there is, like, whatever you think the integration time is going to be, it's probably going to be longer, maybe twice as long. And so make sure you plan for that and account for that.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, excuse me, I think a lot to weigh up there from, as you say, if you look at the whole picture, from that grassroots level change management right through to looking at an integration and what you need, what you want from that, how long that could take. There's a lot of moving parts that I think will require, as you kind of alluded to, I think communication throughout the entire process is surely one of the most critical elements of it, right? And I suppose that brings me to my final question, Eric. Really. So I know you've been obviously in the Adobe space for some time now, a real veteran in the area. What is some key advice that you would give to Adobe users, whether they're new to Adobe Analytics or if they're continued customers staying with Adobe through this next phase? What's some golden nuggets that you would give to them?
Yeah, great question, and a very important one, where a lot of people might hope, or a lot of business owners might expect and think we can just buy a web analytics solution or a customer journey analytics solution out of the box, place it in, and be up and running in no time. There's always more to it than that. And the biggest thing that needs to take place when any company or organization decides to invest in a platform, simple or complex, is investing in people. Investing in your people to own and run this from both a business and a technical end of things. Enterprise class products, especially ones from Adobe, require people with deep levels of involvement, engagement, and investment in learning how to best deploy their stack. Going back to that strength that Adobe has in terms of its flexibility and customizability, that also becomes a challenge in the sense that it's not just a drop it in there and you're off to the races immediately. You have to be thinking about it. And especially with customer journey analytics. And sure, consulting can help. We purchase implementation consulting packages from agencies or from Adobe or whoever, but still, even if you do purchase consulting support, don't think that you'll be successful without full-time owners inside the business itself and champions within the organization itself. So yeah, even if I were to bring on an agency to help me deploy Adobe Analytics, you still need someone to be that champion and owner on the business end, and making sure that you have the right people owning the product as a whole, owning the evangelism of the product. Depending upon the size of your organization, that might be two different people. In our organization, we're one of the largest universities in the States. We have over 180,000 students currently enrolled at WGU. That's a lot of people. And there's a lot of analytics requests and a lot of analytics needs that are coming here, that are coming our way. And so I am not well equipped to handle all of those requests, and so we end up hiring a dedicated owner and evangelist of the reporting aspect of the Adobe platform. But then there's the technical side. Even after the consulting engagement is over, there will still be minor changes that are occurring on a regular basis. So maybe, you want to have your own in-house implementation engineer that will help you with the minor changes. Investing in your own people is going to be hugely important. I'd say, investing in your people before you invest in your platform is probably your biggest key to success. Making sure you have people in place to own and drive the business aspects and even some of the technical aspects will be a key to success, no matter what platform you choose to go with, whether it's Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, or something else. The other thing I will say is that Adobe Experience Platform, that's what CJA is built on top of. This is Adobe's attempt to realize the actual unification of their analytics offerings. It's one of the first tools that's being built from the ground up within Adobe. Like I was alluding to in my history, the Adobe Analytics platform itself was an acquisition, and a lot of their other products and offerings have been acquisitions of smaller companies. This is different. Their execution, Adobe's execution on this roadmap, will dictate their long-term success and potentially your organization's long-term partnership potential with them. So there's a lot riding on this, I think, from Adobe's side, but then also from our side. And as you evaluate that, there's a lot of things to be thinking about, because this has real potential to change and take Adobe's offerings to another level. And if that happens, that can really enhance your individual organizations' potential to grow with them and execute marketing and outreach efforts in a whole new way and in a whole more effective way. So
awesome. No, I love that. And I think, it's difficult for me to sound neutral, being an Adobe recruiter. It does come with that level of bias, I think. But something I think, that you mentioned is getting the hires right and hiring the right people almost before deciding which avenue you then explore. And I think that's something we see, where companies will almost come to us as a last resort saying, right, we've bought this license or we're doing X, Y, Z. We now need 20 hires. Can you go out and help find us the people? Because I almost think it needs to be, as you said, you need those people in the team who are going to be helping drive that change, who can actually consult internally before then deciding on that approach. And I think, that's always the companies that seem to do really well in their strategy, is those people that invest well initially and then kind of grow out organically, But yeah, really, really exciting time, I'm sure, for Adobe and this new path as well. And yeah, really keen to see how it evolves. I'm really, really thankful for your time, Eric. I know how busy you are. Really enjoyed doing this one. And I think the advice you've offered to the Adobe community is incredible. So thank you so much. I know you've got a busy day now at WGU to go back to, so I will let you crack on. But Eric, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise, Tom. Great to chat with you, and best of luck in all your future endeavors to anyone who's watching.
Thanks, Eric. Take care, bud.
Thanks. Bye-bye.